The salvage ship Lucky Strike moved slowly through the asteroid field, its hull scratched and dented from years of dangerous work. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the pilot's chair, his weathered hands steady on the controls as he guided the ship, between floating rocks the size of buildings. His brown eyes scanned the sensor readings, looking for anything worth the fuel they were burning. "Another dead zone," muttered Tommy Brooks from the co-pilot's seat. The young man was barely 25, with sandy hair that never stayed neat and an eagerness that Jake sometimes envied. "We've been out here for 3 weeks and found nothing but space junk." "Patience, kid," Jake replied, his voice carrying the calm of someone who had spent 15 years pulling valuable scraps from the void. "The good finds are always in the places nobody else wants to look." In the engine room below, Lisa Carter was fixing a coolant leak that had been bothering her for days. She was the best engineer Jake had ever worked with, small but tough, with grease-stained hands that could make any machine run better. Lisa had a gift for understanding how things worked, even when they came from completely different worlds. The fourth member of their crew was Dr. Maria Santos, a xenoarchaeologist who paid them to take her to old battlefields and dead worlds. She was quiet most of the time, always reading or studying alien artifacts in her small lab. Jake thought her work was interesting but not very profitable. "Jake, you need to see this." Lisa's voice crackled over the comm system. She sounded excited, which was unusual for her. "I'm picking up some strange readings about 2 kilometers off our port side." Jake turned the ship toward the coordinates Lisa had sent. At first he saw nothing unusual among the drifting rocks. Then Tommy pointed at the long-range scanner. "That's not an asteroid," the young pilot said, his voice full of wonder. Jake stared at the massive object floating in the shadow of a house-sized rock. It was clearly artificial, all angles and curves that nature never made. The hull was dark gray, almost black, and covered with strange symbols that seemed to shift in the light from their ship's floods. "Maria, get up here," Jake called over the comm. "You're going to want to see this." Dr. Santos arrived on the bridge within minutes, her dark hair pulled back and her eyes bright with curiosity. She took one look at the alien ship and gasped. "This is Valthek," she whispered, pressing her face against the viewport. "I've seen symbols like these in ruins on 3 different worlds. Jake, this ship could be thousands of years old." The alien vessel was enormous, at least 7 times the size of the Lucky Strike. Jake could see massive damage along its hull where something had torn through the metal like paper. Whole sections were missing, and dark gaps showed where compartments had been opened to space. "Looks pretty dead to me," Tommy said. "No power readings, no heat signature. Whatever happened to it happened a long time ago." Jake nodded slowly. Dead alien ships were usually good for salvage, but they could also be dangerous. Still, something this old and this big could set them up for life if they found the right technology. "Lisa, scan for any active systems," he ordered. "Maria, what? Can you tell us about these Valthek people?" While Lisa ran her scans, Maria explained what little was known about the Valthek Empire. They had ruled a large part of this sector of space long before humans had even left Earth. Their technology was supposed to be incredibly advanced, but they had disappeared suddenly, leaving only ruins and dead worlds behind. "No active power. Sources," Lisa reported. "But Jake, the materials I'm reading are unlike anything I've ever seen. The hull plating alone could be worth a fortune, and if any of their technology is intact," she didn't need to finish. They all knew what finding working alien technology could mean. It could buy them a new ship, a comfortable retirement, or even a fresh start on one of the core worlds. "All right, we're going aboard," Jake decided. "Lisa, prep the cutting tools. Tommy, keep the ship ready for a quick exit. Maria, you're with me." An hour later, Jake and Maria floated through the alien ship's corridors in their spacesuits. Emergency lights flickered weakly along the walls, powered by some backup system that had somehow survived the centuries. The passages were wider than human ships needed, and the walls were covered with the same shifting symbols they had seen outside. The Valthek were taller than humans, Maria explained as they moved deeper into the ship. "These corridors would have felt normal to them, but they make me feel small." They found the first intact room near what Maria thought was the ship's center. It was filled with strange machines, their surfaces smooth and dark. Jake couldn't tell what any of it was supposed to do, but it all looked incredibly complex. "Lisa would love this," he muttered, recording everything with his suit's camera. They moved on, finding more rooms filled with alien technology. Some areas had been completely destroyed, open to space by whatever had killed the ship, but other sections were untouched, as if the crew had simply walked away yesterday. In what looked like the command center, they found their first real surprise. A pedestal in the center of the room held a device that looked almost like a crystal, but it pulsed with a faint inner light. "That's impossible," Maria breathed. "Nothing should still be powered after this long." Jake approached the crystal carefully. As he got closer, it began to glow brighter and symbols started appearing in the air around it. Maria grabbed his arm. "Don't touch it," she warned. "We don't know what it might do." But it was too late. The crystal had already reacted to their presence. The air in front of them shimmered, and suddenly they were looking at a hologram of an alien figure. The Valthek was tall and elegant, with long limbs and skin that seemed to have a faint silver sheen. Its eyes were large and dark, and when it spoke, the words came out in a language neither of them understood. But then the crystal pulsed again and the words changed to perfect English. "If you are hearing this message, then our greatest fear has come to pass," the alien said, its voice sad and tired. "The Devourers have found us. By the time you discover this ship, my people will likely be extinct, our worlds consumed, our civilization forgotten." Jake and Maria stood frozen, hardly breathing as the message continued. "We have hidden what we could, scattered our knowledge across the void in hopes that someone, someday, might find it and succeed where we failed. The coordinates embedded in this crystal will lead you to our hidden sanctuaries, but beware. The Devourers are patient and they may still be out there, waiting." The hologram flickered and changed, showing star maps and technical diagrams that meant nothing to Jake but made Maria gasp with excitement. "Use our knowledge wisely," the Valthek commander concluded. "The galaxy depends on those who come after us learning from our mistakes. Do not let our deaths be meaningless." The hologram faded, leaving Jake and Maria alone in the silent command center with only the softly glowing crystal for light. "Jake," Maria whispered, her voice shaking with excitement and fear. "Do you understand what this means? This isn't just a salvage job anymore. This could change everything." Jake stared at the crystal, thinking about the aliens' warning and the star maps they had just seen. He was a simple salvage captain, not a hero or an explorer. But sometimes, he thought, the galaxy didn't give you a choice about what you became. "We need to get back to the ship," he said finally, "and then we need to make some calls." 3 months after finding the Valthek ship, Jake Morrison stood in the largest construction bay at Luna Shipyards, watching hundreds of workers crawl over the alien vessel like ants on a fallen tree. The ship had been moved piece by piece from the asteroid field, each section carefully transported to Earth's moon where humanity's best engineers could study it. Admiral Kate Phillips walked up beside him, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and her blue uniform perfectly pressed. She was one of the few people in Earth Defense Command who had believed Jake's story from the beginning. "Still hard to believe it's real," she said, looking up at the massive hull that stretched nearly 2 kilometers above them. "When you first called me with this story, I thought you'd been drinking too much station whiskey." Jake smiled, remembering that conversation. It had taken 3 days of arguing and showing video recordings before anyone would listen to him. Even then, it was only Maria's reputation as a scientist that got them a meeting with the military. "Any word from the deep space monitors?" he asked. The Admiral's face grew serious. "2 more reports this week. Geometric signals just like the ones the Valthek warned us about. Whatever these Devourers are, they're still out there." Down on the construction floor, Lisa Carter was having an argument with Dr. Sam Turner, the quantum physicist in charge of understanding the alien technology. Jake could hear their voices echoing across the bay even from this distance. "The power conduits won't work with human systems," Lisa was saying, her hands covered in grease and alien metal filings. "We need to build adapters for everything, and half the materials don't even exist in our periodic table." Sam Turner was a thin man with thick glasses who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His team had been working around the clock trying to understand how Valthek technology worked. The quantum fold engines alone use physics we're only beginning to understand, Sam replied, frustration clear in his voice. We're trying to rebuild a sports car when we've barely invented the wheel. Jake and the Admiral walked down to join them. The alien ship's engine room was a maze of curved walls and strange machinery that hummed with barely contained energy. Human technicians worked alongside the alien systems, their equipment looking primitive by comparison. How much longer do you need? Admiral Phillips asked. Lisa wiped her hands on a rag and shrugged. At this rate, maybe 2 years. We're basically learning a completely new way of building machines. Every system connects to every other system in ways that don't make sense to us. We don't have 2 years, the Admiral said quietly. Intelligence thinks the Devourer signals are getting stronger. They might be moving this way. Chief Petty Officer Danny Green overheard and joined their conversation. He was a large man with thick arms and a beard that regulation said was too long, but nobody argued with him because he was the best shipwright in the fleet. The hull reconstruction is going faster, Danny reported. We've figured out how to work with their metal, sort of. It's like the ship wants to be fixed. Sometimes damaged sections seal themselves when we're not looking. That was one of the strangest things about the Valthek ship. It seemed to respond to human presence, almost like it was alive. Lights would turn on when people entered rooms, and broken systems sometimes started working again after human technicians spent time near them. Dr. Sam had a theory about this. I think their technology is partially biological, he explained. Not alive exactly, but designed to adapt and learn. It's been dormant for thousands of years, but our neural activity might be waking it up. The neural interface was the biggest challenge they faced. The Valthek had controlled their ships through direct mental connection, but human brains were different. 3 volunteer test pilots had tried to link with the system, and all 3 had ended up in the medical bay with severe headaches and temporary memory loss. Commander Rachel Stone was supposed to be the 4th volunteer, but she wasn't. Scheduled to try for another week. She was a test pilot who had flown every experimental ship the military had built, and she wasn't afraid of a little risk. Jake found her in the ship's reconstructed command center, studying the control systems that had been partially adapted for human use. The crystal that had shown them the Valthek message was now connected to human computers, its alien data slowly being translated into forms they could understand. Any luck with the star maps? Jake asked. Rachel looked up from her tablet, her red hair falling across her eyes. We've identified 12 locations so far. 3 are in systems we've already explored, but the others are completely unknown. If there really are Valthek survivors in those places, we need to reach them before the Devourers do. The pressure was getting to everyone. Working 18-hour days, sleeping in the shipyard dormitories, eating rations that tasted like cardboard, but nobody complained because they all understood what was at stake. Tommy Brooks had become the ship's unofficial test pilot for the smaller systems. The navigation computers, communication arrays, and sensor networks were easier to adapt than the main engines, and his natural piloting instincts helped him understand how the alien controls were supposed to work. It's like learning to fly all over again, he told Jake one evening as they ate dinner in the cafeteria. Human ships respond to what you tell them to do. This thing responds to what you want it to do, even if you don't say it out loud. Maria Santos had set up her laboratory inside the alien ship, studying Valthek culture and history, through artifacts found in crew quarters and storage areas. She had learned more about the extinct civilization in 3 months than humanity had discovered, in 50 years of exploring dead worlds. They were peaceful, she explained to Jake as she showed him alien artwork and personal items. Their empire lasted for thousands of years because they preferred cooperation to conquest. But that same peaceful nature made them vulnerable when the Devourers arrived. The Devourers remained a mystery. The Valthek records described them as a machine intelligence that consumed entire civilizations, growing stronger with each conquest. They turned conquered populations into more machines, creating an endless army that swept across the galaxy like a plague. Why did they stop? Jake asked. If they destroyed the Valthek Empire, why didn't they keep going? Maria had been wondering the same thing. Maybe they ran out of targets in this part of the galaxy, or maybe they went dormant like the ship did, waiting for something to wake them up. The thought that humanity's expansion into space might have attracted the Devourers' attention kept everyone working harder. Earth Defense Command had quietly moved additional fleets to the outer colonies, but conventional human weapons would be useless against an enemy that had destroyed a civilization thousands of years more advanced. After 6 months of constant work, the ship that the construction teams had named Phoenix was starting to look like something that might actually fly. The hull repairs were nearly complete, and most of the major systems had been successfully adapted for human use. But the neural interface remained a problem. "We need a volunteer," Sam Turner announced during a meeting in Admiral Phillips's office. "Someone willing to risk permanent brain damage to test the mental link." Jake had been expecting this moment. "I'll do it." "No," Lisa said immediately. "Jake, you're not a pilot. If something goes wrong, we're all dead anyway," Jake replied. "This ship was my find, my responsibility. If someone has to take the risk, it should be me." Admiral Phillips studied him for a long moment. "The medical team thinks they figured out how to make the interface safer. Brain activity monitors, automatic disconnection if your vital signs spike. But there are no guarantees." Jake nodded. He had spent months watching the ship come together, seeing human determination and alien technology merge into something new. The Phoenix wasn't just a rebuilt Valthek vessel anymore. It was something unique, a symbol of what humanity could accomplish when faced with the impossible. 3 days later, Jake sat in the command chair while technicians attached monitoring cables to his head and chest. The neural interface headset looked like a crown made of crystal and metal, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Remember," Dr. Sam said, "start small. Just try to access the navigation system. Don't attempt to control the engines until we know your brain can handle the connection." Jake took a deep breath and put on the headset. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world exploded into light and sensation as his mind touched the ship's ancient consciousness. He could feel every system, every circuit, every piece of alien technology as if it were part of his own body. And in the depths of the ship's memory, something that had been sleeping for thousands of years finally woke up. Jake's mind floated in a sea of alien thoughts and memories. The Phoenix wasn't just a machine, it was alive in ways human technology had never been. He could feel its joy at being whole again, its eagerness to fly among the stars, and underneath it all, a deep sadness for the civilization that had created it. "Jake, can you hear me?" Dr. Sam's voice seemed to come from very far away. "I'm here," Jake whispered, his physical voice barely working while his consciousness explored the ship's systems. "It's incredible. I can see everything. Every wire, every circuit, every quantum pathway. The ship wants to teach me." Through the neural link, Jake learned that the Phoenix had been the flagship of the Valthek fleet, commanded by a warrior poet named Kethvan who had died trying to protect a refugee convoy. The ship remembered every battle, every victory, and every loss. But most of all, it remembered the terror of watching entire worlds consumed by the Devourers. After an hour, the medical team made Jake disconnect. His head pounded, and strange dreams filled his sleep for days afterward, but the test had been a success. The interface worked, and more importantly, it had given them access to the complete Valthek database. "We know where they are," Admiral Phillips announced at the next briefing. 3 hidden bases, each one containing survivors in cryogenic sleep. The nearest one is in the Tau Ceti system, about 12 light-years from here. The Phoenix's first mission would be a rescue operation, but as the ship prepared for its maiden voyage, long-range sensors detected something that made everyone's blood run cold. "Geometric patterns, Sector 7, reported Lieutenant Ben Carter from the communications station. "The same signals we've been tracking, but much stronger now." Jake was in the command chair, the neural interface crown resting lightly on his head. Through the ship's enhanced sensors, he could see what was coming. 3 objects, each the size of a small moon, moving through space in perfect formation. They weren't ships in any sense humans understood, they were something else entirely. "Devourers," he whispered, and the Phoenix shuddered around him as if the ship itself was afraid. The alien constructs were still months away, but their destination was clear. They were heading for the Tau Ceti system, the same place where Valtech survivors waited in their frozen sleep. We have to get there first, Jake decided. If the Devourers reach those people before we do, they'll be lost forever. Admiral Phillips wanted to send a full fleet, but Jake knew they didn't have time. The Phoenix was the only ship fast enough to make the journey, and its hybrid technology was humanity's best hope against an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. The crew that boarded the Phoenix for its first real mission was a mixture of Jake's original salvage team and military specialists. Lisa had been promoted to chief engineer. Tommy was the primary pilot, and Maria continued her research into Valtech culture. Commander Rachel Stone led a squad of Marines, while Dr. Elena Vasquez brought medical equipment for treating alien physiology. As the Phoenix left Earth's solar system, Jake felt the ship's excitement through the neural link. It had been dead for thousands of years, and now it was flying again, carrying new friends toward an uncertain destiny. The journey to Tau Ceti took 3 days using the quantum fold drive. Jake spent most of that time connected to the ship's systems, learning to pilot the most advanced vessel in the galaxy. The Phoenix responded to his thoughts as much as his commands, anticipating what he needed before he asked for it. "It's like, the ship is reading my mind," he told Lisa during one of his breaks from the interface. "Maybe it is," she replied, studying the energy readings from the neural connection. "These Valtech didn't just build machines, they built partners. The Phoenix isn't serving you, Jake, it's working with you." They found the hidden base exactly where the star maps indicated, buried inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the outer system. The facility was dark and cold, its power systems running on minimum to maintain the cryogenic chambers inside. Dr. Elena and her team worked carefully to revive the first Valtech survivor. Commander Zeth-Ka was tall and graceful like the hologram they had seen, but his silver skin was marked with scars from old battles. When he opened his large, dark eyes and saw humans standing around his chamber, his first word was a curse in his own language. "You are not Valtech," he said once Maria's translation device kicked in. "How did you find this place?" Jake explained, about discovering the Phoenix and rebuilding it with human technology. Zeth-Ka listened with growing amazement, sometimes asking questions that Maria had to translate carefully. "You took our greatest warship and made it work again?" Zeth-Ka asked. "But your people are so young, so primitive. How is this possible?" "We learn fast," Jake replied simply. There were 47 Valtech survivors in the base, the last remnants of a civilization that had once ruled hundreds of worlds. Most were civilians, scientists, artists, teachers, but a few were military officers like Zeth-Ka, who had fought against the Devourers in the final battles. As Dr. Elena's team slowly revived the survivors, Zeth-Ka studied the Phoenix with wonder and concern. The ship looked familiar to him, but the human modifications were obvious everywhere. Control panels had been rebuilt for human hands, corridors had been adjusted for human height, and the neural interface had been completely redesigned. "You have made it into something new," he told Jake as they stood on the bridge. "Neither fully Valtech nor fully human. I am not sure if this is wisdom or madness." They didn't have time to debate the question. Long-range sensors detected the approaching Devourer fleet still days away but closing fast. The base couldn't be defended and there weren't enough ships to evacuate everyone. "We fight," Zeth-Ka said simply when Jake explained the situation. "The Phoenix was built for war. If it must die protecting my people, then that is an honorable death." Jake had been afraid of this moment. He was a salvage captain, not a military commander. He had never fought in a real battle, never fired a shot in anger. But the neural interface showed him the Phoenix's memories of combat, and he began to understand what the ship needed from him. The Devourer scouts arrived first, 3 smaller constructs that moved like living things despite being made of metal and energy. They were beautiful in a terrible way, their surfaces covered with patterns that hurt to look at directly. "All hands. Battle stations," Jake announced over the ship's communication system. His voice was steady, though his heart was pounding. The Phoenix responded to the threat like a hunting animal. Weapon systems came online, shields strengthened, and the quantum fold drive prepared for combat maneuvers. Through the neural link, Jake could feel the ship's eagerness for battle after thousands of years of sleep. The first Devourer scout attacked with beams of pure energy that would have destroyed any human ship instantly, but the Phoenix wasn't just a human ship anymore. Its shields absorbed the attack and converted the energy into power for its own weapons. Jake's counterattack came not from careful planning but from instinct shared through the neural interface. The Phoenix twisted through space in ways that violated human understanding of physics, striking the scout from 3 directions at once. The Devourer construct exploded in a shower of alien metal and dying light. "Impossible," Zethka whispered, from his position at the tactical station. "The Devourers adapt to any attack pattern. They should have predicted your moves." But the second scout fell just as quickly, and then the third. Jake realized what was happening. The Phoenix wasn't fighting like a Valthek ship anymore, and it wasn't fighting like a human ship either. It was fighting like something completely new, using tactics that the Devourers had never encountered. "They can't adapt to us," Jake said, understanding flooding through him. "We're not following any pattern they recognize. We're making it up as we go along." The victory felt good, but Jake knew it was just the beginning. The main Devourer fleet was still coming, and 3 scouts were nothing compared to the force that had destroyed the Valthek Empire. As the Phoenix prepared to face its greatest test, Jake felt the ship's confidence flowing through the neural link. They had learned something important in this first battle. Human unpredictability combined with Valthek technology created something the Devourers couldn't understand or counter. For the first time since finding the derelict ship in that asteroid field, Jake began to believe they might actually win. The main Devourer fleet arrived like a storm made of metal and nightmares. Jake watched through the Phoenix's sensors as 3 enormous constructs dropped out of hyperspace, each one larger than Earth's moon and bristling with weapons that had destroyed countless worlds. "By the ancestors," Zethka whispered, his silver skin pale with fear. "I had forgotten how terrible they are." The Devourers moved in perfect formation, their surfaces covered with geometric patterns that shifted and changed like living tattoos. Smaller ships swarmed around them like insects. Thousands of scout vessels that had once been the populations of conquered worlds now turned into machines of war. Jake felt the Phoenix tremble through the neural link, not from fear, but from eagerness. The ship had been built to fight these monsters, and it remembered every battle from the old war. But this time would be different. This time it had human creativity on its side. "All human ships, this is Admiral Phillips," came the transmission from Earth. "We're sending everything we have, but it'll take 3 days to reach you." Jake looked at the tactical display showing the approaching reinforcements. 24 human vessels, the strongest fleet Earth had ever assembled, but they would arrive too late. The Devourers were already moving toward the hidden base where the Valthek survivors were still being revived. "We can't wait," Jake decided. "Tommy, plot a course between them and the base. Lisa, give me everything the engines can handle." Tommy's hands flew over the navigation controls, his young face set with determination. "Course plotted, Captain, but Jake, it's just us against all of them." "Not just us," Jake replied, settling the neural interface crown on his head. Through the link, he could feel every human on the ship, their fear, their courage, their desperate hope. And underneath it all, he felt the Phoenix itself, ancient and wise but renewed by human determination. The battle began as soon as the Phoenix moved to intercept the Devourer fleet. Thousands of energy beams lanced out from the enemy constructs, enough firepower to crack a planet. But the Phoenix wasn't where the beams expected it to be. Jake had learned something from the scout battle. Human tactics were chaotic, unpredictable, and completely different from the careful strategies the Valthek had used. The Devourers had adapted to counter every logical battle plan, but they couldn't adapt to insanity. The Phoenix spun through the enemy formation like a dancer, firing at targets that made no strategic sense and dodging attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. Lisa's engineering team had modified the Valthek weapons with human improvements, guns that could change their energy frequency mid-shot, missiles that could split into smaller warheads, and shield systems that fed on enemy fire. "This is madness," Zethka said, watching the tactical display in amazement. You're attacking their strongest points and ignoring their weak ones. No rational commander would fight this way. Good thing I'm not rational, Jake replied, grinning as the Phoenix destroyed another scout ship with the impossible shot that curved around 3 obstacles. But even human unpredictability had limits. The Phoenix was fast and clever, but it was still just one ship against an entire fleet. Slowly, the Devourers began to surround them, their adaptive intelligence starting to understand the new fighting style. That's when the miracle happened. Captain Alex Murphy arrived first. His battle, cruiser Defiance dropping out of hyperspace with guns blazing. Behind him came more human ships. Destroyers, frigates, even converted cargo vessels with makeshift weapons bolted to their hulls. Sorry we're late to the party. Murphy's voice crackled over the communications. We came as fast as we could. But the human reinforcements were still outnumbered 10-1. The Devourer fleet began to reorganize, their ancient intelligence calculating new strategies to deal with the expanded threat. Jake, Lisa's voice came through the neural link. I'm reading massive power buildups in all 3 main constructs. They're preparing to fire some kind of superweapon. Through the ship's sensors, Jake could see energy gathering in the heart of each Devourer construct. Whatever they were planning, it would be enough to destroy every human ship in the system. All ships, fall back to the asteroid belt, Jake ordered. Use the rocks for cover. As the human fleet retreated, Jake felt a new presence in the neural link. The other Valthek survivors had finally awakened, and they were reaching out to the Phoenix through their own mental connections. Suddenly, Jake wasn't alone in the ship's consciousness. Zethka's tactical knowledge flowed through the link, along with the memories of dozens of other Valthek who had fought the Devourers before. But more than that, Jake felt their hope. For the first time in thousands of years, they had allies who might actually win. The constructs have a weakness, Zethka said, his thoughts mixing with Jake's through the neural interface. Their central cores are protected by quantum barriers, but if you can disrupt the barriers simultaneously, Jake understood immediately. It would require perfect timing and incredible precision, but it was possible. The Phoenix would have to get close enough to all 3 constructs to disrupt their barriers at exactly the same moment, while the human fleet kept the smaller ships busy. Admiral Phillips, this is Jake Morrison, he transmitted to the arriving Earth fleet. I need every ship you have to create a distraction. Keep those scouts busy for exactly 60 seconds. Admiral Phillips had arrived with the main fleet, her flagship bristling with the newest human weapons. What are you planning, Jake? Something stupid, Jake replied, and through the neural link, he felt the Phoenix's agreement. The final attack began with the Phoenix racing toward the center of the Devourer formation while every human ship opened fire at once. The space around the constructs filled with explosions and energy beams as the human fleet threw everything they had at the enemy swarm. Jake felt the Phoenix's joy as it accelerated toward impossible speeds. The quantum fold drive pushed beyond its safety limits. The ship's hull groaned under the stress, but it held together through human engineering and Valthek determination. The first construct's weapons locked onto the Phoenix when it was still 1,000 kilometers away. Energy beams hot enough to melt asteroids reached out like grasping fingers. But Jake spun the ship through patterns that made no sense to artificial intelligence. At exactly the right moment, Jake activated the disruption pulse. The Phoenix's modified weapons fired a beam of pure quantum energy at the first construct's core, followed immediately by 2 more beams at the other constructs. The quantum barriers flickered and failed for just an instant. That instant was enough. The construct's own stored energy turned against them, cascading failures spreading through systems that had conquered 1,000 worlds. One by one, the 3 massive Devourer ships began to tear themselves apart. The smaller ships stopped fighting immediately, their controlling intelligence severed. Thousands of scout vessels drifted helplessly in space, their crews freed from centuries of mechanical slavery. Jake collapsed in the command chair as the neural interface shut down automatically. Through the view screen, he could see the wreckage of the Devourer fleet spreading across space like a metallic cloud. Is it over? Tommy asked, his voice barely a whisper. It's over, Zethka confirmed, tears of silver running down his scarred face. The Devourers are finished. After all these years, they're finally finished. In the months that followed, the Phoenix became famous throughout human space and beyond. The ship that had been built from scrap and determination had ended a threat that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. Jake kept the Phoenix, but he was no longer just a salvage captain. He had become something new, a bridge between species, a symbol of what could be accomplished when different peoples worked together. The Valthek survivors helped humanity understand their technology, while human engineers showed the ancient race new ways of building and creating. Other alien species emerged from hiding, eager to join the growing alliance that the Phoenix had started. And sometimes late at night when the ship was quiet, Jake would put on the neural interface crown and talk with the Phoenix's ancient consciousness. The ship would tell him stories of the old galaxy, of civilizations that had risen and fallen among the stars, but mostly they would talk about the future, about exploration and discovery, about new worlds to visit and new friends to make. The Phoenix had been reborn from scrap metal and human stubbornness, but it had become something greater than either of its parts. It had become legend,